Welcome to the Stone Carving and Lettering Takeaway. I'm Charlotte Howarth.
And I'm Nina Bilby.
And the first thing we have to do today is start with an apology because we're a bit late in this podcast in getting it out there. And why is that, Nina?
Well, I came to the end of a very busy end of term at college and was away from home for about a month. And then I got hit with the most extraordinary viral cold. So I've been really ill to the point where I certainly couldn't inflict my voice or coughing or misery on our listeners, so apologies to that. So I'm feeling marginally better now, and as you can hear, I'm not coughing at the moment.
Yeah, and then I was working away.
And you were working away, which we'll hear about in a second.
So we're just about to talk about my hole, aren't we?
Yes, we're getting there. And so apologies for that. Usually the podcast comes out on the 10th, and it's a little bit late this month, but here we are.
Full of joy.
And other pharmaceutical products. So we've got some exciting news, haven't we, Charlotte? We are in the process for booking for our new course, which will be running in November. And you're going to tell us all about that.
Yeah, we've got a 2-day weekend carving course in November, the 11th and 12th of November. And it's set in North Norfolk in a place called Creek Abbey. And we rent a huge old barn for the weekend. And we've got 12 spaces. So there's a limited space of 12 people with me and Nina are on hand throughout the day. No previous experience is necessary. And everybody who's been on these 2-day courses before has really enjoyed them and, more importantly, come away with a finished piece of work. And in fact, some people have even just done the day. So you can come for 1 or 2 days and walk away with a small finished carving, all tools, everything you need, inspiration, everything. We will get you up and running and out of the door at the end of the day or weekend with something incredible that you've made. Or equally, if you are already a carver and are looking for some more specific guidance on any aspect of your carving work, we will also be able to help you and push forward your current skill set as well. So everybody's welcome. It doesn't matter what your skill set or abilities are, we will work with you. And we promise it's a fun, enjoyable, and, we're always amazed at the atmosphere at the end of these workshops. They're absolutely brilliant and we have such a great time. So the details are on the website. The link is in the show notes. If you've got any questions, feel free to email and get in touch and I'll answer them as best as I can. So that's the 11th and 12th of November 2023 and it's in North Norfolk, not far from Burnham Market. And if you're interested, have a look at the website. And again, places are limited and we've already got a few places booked up already from people who've been on our previous courses, so don't hang around too long if you're interested.
So tell us about your hole.
My
Charlotte.
hole.
What have you been doing in your hole?
I have been working on site up in the north of England, carving an additional inscription onto a memorial stone that a friend of mine carved and can't, for different reasons, isn't able to do the carving themselves anymore. And I somehow volunteered to be the person that was able to do it. Don't ask me how. Because there was many moments of regret during the process. So I was doing a very low couple of lines on the bottom of a memorial stone inside that couldn't be lifted for various reasons. And I had to dig a big hole at the base of the headstone to sit in for a week. So I was basically sitting in a small hole at the end of the headstone up to my chest, and sat cross-legged for 8 hours a day carving an inscription, and it was incredibly hard work and very, very uncomfortable. At many moments through that process, I thought about our previous conversations where we talked about the lap of tranquility, where you have to just calm your body and leave that bit of your discomfort aside and focus on the task in hand. And sometimes it's easier to do than other times. When your legs start cramping, it's obviously more difficult to do that. So anyway, I did it. I was in my hole for 4 days.
Did you dig the hole? You personally had to dig this hole?
I got on site and I had everything I needed with me. So I had a big spoil bag, like a builder's merchant's bag, and I dug the soil. It was pure clay. So I dug down and made my hole. And then I have a brilliant pop-up tent for working on site. And it doesn't have a ground sheet in it. It's just like the 4 walls and the ceiling. So it just slips over the back of the headstone, and it pops up, and it's absolutely brilliant shelter from the sun and rain, and I can work in that and be sheltered from the wind, the rain and the sun. And it was funny because normally when you're on site, lots of people ask you lots of questions and you get quite a lot of disruption in busy places, but nobody came to talk to me all week. And I thought it was quite unusual until one of the cemetery guys told me everybody thought it was an exhumation.
Oh my God. It's a crime scene.
It's a crime scene. So, but that worked quite well for me because it meant I wasn't very disrupted. So I dug the hole and then I had to sit in it all week. So I lined it with a bit of an old plastic tablecloth and a blanket. And that actually made a massive difference because it meant I then wasn't groveling around in the soil and the mud. And it just, the little bit of softening from the blanket really helped. I taped it all in place on the bottom of the headstone to keep it tidy so that everything didn't move. Anyway, it was very, very hard work, and I'm extremely glad to get home.
And how long were you away from home? How long were you sitting in this hole?
Left home on Sunday evening, and then I started work on Monday morning at the cemetery. I got there as soon as I could in the morning, and most days I did 8 till 5. So that meant sitting in the hole from about sort of by the time I got there, set my tent and everything up, got my tools out, 8:30, finished at about 4:30. So I was mostly in the hole from 8:30 to 4:30. And because when you want to get the job done, I tend not to stop for breaks. I just get up, have a quick bite to eat for lunch, and then I'm back in my hole because you
And
just
how
want
many
to get
days?
done. I did 4
How many
days.
days?
I wasn't
4
sure. You
days.
never know how long it's going to take. So because I was able to do a slightly longer day, it took me 4 days to finish the whole thing.
And
But
how many characters did you have to carve in the 4 days in that
I think it was
uncomfortable
70
position?
characters, but I had to draw everything on. As soon as I got to site, I had to dig my hole, then and put my tent up. Then I had to draw everything directly onto the stone. So I couldn't have a drawing other than a scale drawing because I didn't have a copy or a rubbing of the headstone, which I would have needed to do a full-size drawing prior to arriving because the lettering had to match another carver's hand.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to make sure that your carving doesn't look any different. And so you have to tune into the individual different styles of another person, which is, everybody carves differently. This other carving, it was beautiful, but very different to how I would normally carve. And so I don't want my style to come through. I want it to look seamless. It took me a day to draw it on site, and then 2.5 days to carve it, and then a day to clean it, half a day to clean it up, clean the whole headstone, repaint the whole inscription so everything looks like it's been fitted and done in one go.
God.
And a really lovely family. They all came and had a look and were obviously very moved by the fact somebody would come and do that for them.
I know, yeah.
And that really makes a difference, actually. That's what we do these things for, is, people have gone through this process of grief and you help them weirdly by doing something uncomfortable.
And it was a good 4 hours away, wasn't it? You're in Northumberland, basically. You live in Norfolk, but you're in Northumberland.
Yeah, it was a good 4 hours drive. So I'd sorted some accommodation very local to the site. So whenever I go and do these jobs in cemeteries, which isn't very often, but over the years, they come up, and you never know what a cemetery is going to be like. They can be all quite varied. And I've been in some, especially some of the North London cemeteries are huge, and you can find yourself in a very isolated spot. And sometimes you can get quite a lot of unsocial behaviour in cemeteries. So when I was working in London years ago, there was a security team who would check in on me through the day.
Yeah.
I always feel when I'm working in those places, it's very important to, obviously you have to let the cemetery authorities know you're there, but there's always a grounds team on the ground who might not know you're going to be there. So I always go out of my way to introduce myself, show them what I'm doing, let them know what days I'm going to be working there. And they'll keep, they keep an eye out for you. If you need a bit of help, they'll always help you. There was a lovely guy at the cemetery this week who helped me fill my hole in at the end of my carving. Because at the end of the 4 days, I was very tired and I had a huge builder's sack full of, it was actually pure clay. and it all needed to go back into the hole that I dug. And just the physical lifting that shovel up with the clay on the end, I just the thought of it drained my body. And this lovely young man just came and did it in 15 minutes for me. It was, you know, it made my day. It was so
and that's all
kind of
because
him.
you sought them out and you went to them. You said, "This is what I'm doing. This is who I am. I'm going to be here for this a lot of time." So you're on their radar, aren't you? So
Yes.
it doesn't matter where you're working. Always search out the people who are responsible for that area. Don't feel shy about introducing yourself, because it's so important, isn't it? Because you don't know when or how you might need somebody's help. But that's such a brilliant thing for him to do for you at the end of the exhausting 4 days.
Yeah, it was really lovely of him. And I know we've talked about these things before, and I've got a little van. You have to be completely self-sufficient in many ways, because you can't just go and get tools if you forget them. And you've got all your tools on site. And so I was talking about going to the toilet.
Yeah.
And so in the back of my van, I have a little tiny compost toilet, and it means that I can just nip in there. You know, I'm a middle-aged woman and I feel like I'm always going to the toilet these days, you know, Madam Wee Wee.
Yes.
But if been on other sites over the years, and going to the toilet is a 15 or 20-minute round trip on a cemetery. Well, if you go 4 times a day, that's an hour of your day gone. That's an hour of your working day on a wee break.
And sometimes, you know, people, there's nothing provided. And I think people overlook the necessity for things like fresh water.
Yeah.
So if I do anything remote, I always have a kind of camping water container in the back of the van, and, you know, wet wipes and stuff like that. I mean, often it's to wash my hands, or to, you know, I have a little camping stove if I want to make a cup of tea, what have you. And it's just that kind of, you may not use them, you may not need to. Somebody might say there's a kettle and there's a restroom and here you are. But often, like you say, you don't want to have to possibly get your overalls off and, you know, walk into somebody's work.
I don't think there were any toilets in this cemetery. The ones that were there were old, derelict and locked up.
And a long way away, probably. No, it's really interesting. I think finding out what people take to these kind of remote sites is really
I take a flask. I have a really good flask. I take one hot flask and, like you, lots of bottles of water, wet wipes, because of course we've talked about this before, but when you're in a cemetery, and especially digging down in a hole, the soil composition is completely different. So if you're having your lunch, always have to make sure your hands are clean before you eat your lunch.
And it's funny, I think, because people, when I've worked there before, you know, I'm often the only woman, and guys are very happy to go behind a bush, and they look a bit horror struck actually when a woman turns up. Sometimes they're like, "Oh my God, you know, we go behind that brick wall," and you're like, "You don't need to worry about that. I'm sorted with that. I just need to be able to park fairly close to where I want to be," and then you're kind of self-sufficient, and it kind of saves a lot of awkwardness, I think, also, and discomfort, obviously. But
I think if you can carry your own little toilet, whether you've got a porta potty, a little compost toilet, you can just get little camping buckets with toilet seats, whatever you've got is actually transformational when you're working on site, especially particularly as a woman.
And I think it's not talked about. It's quite, people find that a bit squeamish to talk about.
Yeah.
But it is really, really important. So I have two. I have a cassette toilet.
I know, I've used it.
Small. You've used my cassette toilet. God damn it. And I also have a thing called a kamikaze, which is a bucket in a kind of stand with a nice little lid and a lovely little toilet seat, and it's quite, you know, and you just have to empty it. But often I feel sometimes I don't want to have to empty it in an area, and a cassette toilet, I've seen them for sale in discount supermarkets for about 40-50 quid. And
you can put it through your account, put it through your business account,
put it through your accounts. exactly It can stay in the garage until you need it, or the workshop, or you could just use it every day like I do in my workshop, because I don't have access to a toilet in my workshop that isn't a 20-minute, 25-minute round trip. So that's exactly why. Anyway, enough of that. You got home, and so 4 days in a hole. You did a beautiful inscription. I love the fact that you had to not carve in your own style while you were there. The added complication is that you have to match somebody else's inscription. I think that's a really interesting
what I really like about doing that. So I've been carving, it feels like forever. I've been drawing letters forever, and some people won't take on these jobs because it's not their work, but I always find it fascinating. It's almost like it's a little bit of insight into another person's head when you have to emulate their lettering. and you see how the junctions of their letters, where the lettering that I've just carved had a very distinctive R, and the way the swelling on the tail of the R worked, it was in a completely different place to how I would have done it. And it was very beautiful, and it would have never occurred to me to have made that form. So for me, it's like getting into somebody else's head for a few days and looking at how they make their forms. And it's very difficult when you've carved as long as I have as well to put your own traits aside so that you don't just automatically carve them, because you weight in certain places and narrow in certain places. And when somebody has a slightly different way of doing those things, you have to constantly reference everything in front of you to stop yourself just automatically cutting what you like to cut. And so I find when I'm carving in that way, my eyes are scanning the work above me to cross-reference it continually. So I'm not just cutting blind. I'm constantly referencing the subtleties and trying to match them as best I could.
And it's really, for me, it's as a stone carver and with a background in restoration or historic architectural carving, that's exactly what you have to do if you're working on a Romanesque or a late Gothic. You know, one of the projects I'm doing at the minute is with very, very stylistically late Gothic, and the little faces are they're so nuanced to that time period, and you can reference it through two-dimensional illuminated manuscripts and carving it and stained glass. There's lots of examples to change it to a more contemporary look, because that's where we are and that's what we carve. But it's one of the things you have to learn as an architectural carver, is to allow your ego or your kind
it's
of
exactly what it is, isn't it? Your
to
ego.
take a back step and say this has to look like this, and not try and enforce your experience on it, not experience, but your kind of like
nuances.
The nuances have to work in that area. And I think I hadn't really, when I think about copperplate script or heavy Gothic script, I could understand how you would have to change. But actually, when you're talking about a contemporary or relatively contemporary inscription and the nuances of changing to look like somebody else's hand, I think that's brilliant and such a disciplined thing to do. Some people really struggle to not put their own personality into things, but it's such a great discipline.
It is, I'd agree.
In the style of.
Yes.
And it's not easy. When people do it and do it well, as a carver, I can recognize when people carve in a particular style really well, and they kind of eliminate their own personal style, and it just looks like it fits in that era. I'm always really, really excited by that and impressed by that. So that's really interesting to hear you talk about the same things. Actually, it's the same things as what we do.
So in this month's podcast, our main topic of conversation isn't the hole that I dug myself into.
Not your personal discomfort.
It's actually, we're talking about sourcing stone, because we've had quite a few emails from people about where to get stone, how to get stone, and we've done a small amount of research on our listeners' behalf about sourcing stone. And we thought we'd start off with a really basic how to order stone from a quarry. So most of the stone that we would use, we would order directly from a quarry or from a sort of a wholesale that deals with those range of quarries for us.
A middle person,
especially since Brexit. You know, I might have ordered my stone directly from Ireland previously, but now I'll definitely go to
it's changed, hasn't it? Ordering stone has definitely changed. You're almost always either dealing, if it's a UK based stone, the quarry. If not, you're really dealing with an importer.
That's right. So we can mostly just talk about our experiences of ordering stone here in the UK, but we have spoken to some carvers in New England and other areas of America who have said a little bit about the situation, particularly with slate in the States. And like here, stone suppliers chop and change all the time. The quality of different stones changes. But one of the discussions me and Nina had just before we started recording was the order of which you give your stone dimensions to the quarry. And do you want to kick off on that?
So I think the things to differentiate between are when you're you're ordering stone for a memorial or letter forms, and my specific experience is ordering stone for sculpture or for large pieces or pieces of masonry that will fit within a building, and they're three-dimensional pieces of stone, so they have a kind of depth to them, they have a height, a depth, a width, etc. And those people who are interested in buying freestanding stones for sculpture, the first thing you have to work out is the bedding on the natural stone. So you can talk to a quarry, you can talk to other sculptors, you can go online, there's lots of kind of natural stone forums you can go out there that will tell you how different UK or European stones will fare outside a sculpture. But in general terms, when you're ordering stone from a quarry or a supplier, an importer, you're looking at the length of stone, which if I was ordering a stone for a statue, let's say the statue's facing me, I'm looking at the face is looking forwards. The length of the stone, if the statue is, it's very difficult to talk about this without talking about beds. So natural stone has beds. I'm talking about limestones now, limestones and sandstones. They are laid down over millennia in beds. Now, stone is strong in compression, which means if you imagine a book laying on a table, if the book is laying on the table with the cover facing you, if you push the book and all the pages of the book together, that book is in compression. And that's exactly how the beds in stone work. So it can be weakened if you push it in any other direction. So I'm going to talk about, let's say you want to order a stone naturally bedded. Now, naturally bedded means the lump of stone is sitting in the orientation that it was made. Let's use, like geology. That's not geology term, it's my term.
But it's sitting in the quarry, the way they're going to saw it out.
And the way it comes out of the ground, the natural way it comes out of the ground.
And that's a natural bed wise.
Okay, so naturally bedded stone, the length, you have to go in a particular order. So I ring up a quarry and I want a length, width or depth and height. And height comes last. It's not always intuitive to do it that way. The length of the stone that your statue would be from left to right. So it would be, you might say, or the width of the stone, but it's not. The front of the stone that you're looking at is called the length, from left to right. The width or / depth of the stone is from front to back. And the height of the stone is pretty self-evident, is from the ground to the top or the top to the ground. So the length is the front view from left to right. The width and depth is from front to back, and then the height is from the ground to the top. And that will give you a statue.
As a person, the length is the width of my hips.
Yes.
The depth is the distance between my tummy and my bum.
Yes, or your toes and your bum.
And the height is my feet to the top of my head.
Absolutely. Yeah. So left to right is length, front to back is width, bottom to top, like ground to the head of your toe is height. And if you order your stone in any other way, if you were to put the height first, you will get something very, very different delivered to your door. So if you're in any doubt whatsoever, send the quarry or the supplier a sketch of what you're looking for. Orientate it in the sketch, and then they will come back to you if there's any doubt in the way that you want this stone bedded. Now, there's another conversation to be had about ordering stones out of natural bedding. Some stones are better off. There's also the restrictions on natural bed. A lot of limestones in this country can only be ordered in certain heights. You will only get certain heights, for instance, in Portland limestones. But that's real generalisation of how to order carving stone.
So in the UK, we've got a range of different quarries that we use and different suitabilities. But for most people who are learning, we would probably recommend our friends at Southern Stone Supplies for small pieces of really nice soft stone, ready to carve, sawn to size. And they do a really good range of different stones that they import. And they also ship worldwide. And I had a conversation with them about people in America wanting to source stone. And what they said was really interesting to me, because they said America's so big, they have to pay for shipping anyway. If you order stone from the States, you have to pay for shipping anyway. And it's not that different to the shipping costs that Southern Stone charge. So I'll put the Southern Stone links on the website, because it's where we would recommend you could, if you're just starting out and you want to have a go or improve your stone carving skills, Southern Stone have a massive range of tools. They have a really good range of carving materials, and they're competitively priced when you're starting out. If you're looking looking for a more professional line of inquiry and you're early on in your career and you don't know where to go, definitely get in touch with other sculptors who you might know or carvers and ask for advice. Most people will point you in the right direction. In the UK, we have a natural stone directory with all the quarries listed and the different types of stone. But for letter carving and working stone outside, it's a very limited palette of materials that are frost proof. So, always talk to everybody is what I would say.
I did some research recently, and your average lot use a lot of French limestones in the UK for sculpture, and the average price for a limestone block here, 6-side sawn, so sawn into a cube, not randomly picked out of the quarry, is £5,500. That's with VAT. So that's a large amount of money, and that can be terrifying when you're kind of looking to buy stone. I would give the advice to people starting off with sculpture, first of all, to go to Southern Stone and buy the smaller cut pieces for the garden. But if you're looking for more random pieces of stone, you could go to a local supplier. Most local suppliers, or like Wells Cathedral Works, etc., they will have a scant palette. A scant is the bits cut off projects that are left behind. Often you can buy those pieces of scant from the suppliers quite cheaply. All you need to do is go with a car, always go with a friend, and they often have a skip full of stuff that they're having to recycle if you're looking for small pieces. I would say ring these people up, and also always ring ahead and say you're coming. Don't just pitch up to a stone suppliers and expect them to be available to kind of show you around. They're very, very busy. Then often on site, cutting, etc. And ring ahead, arrange for a time to come, take your car. Don't turn up with a van. That's really cheeky. Turn up with a car initially when you're making, when you're making relationships with these people, and just take a few pieces of stone. Don't kind of just like fill it up like pick and mix. Take a few pieces of stone, work the relationship with those people, and just take what you can use. There's no point filling up your workshop with stuff you're never going to use, have to store. So talk to them, make a relationship with them, offer them some money often they'll give you stuff for free, but it doesn't hurt to offer them some cash for the stone that you're taking off the scant pallets. Like I said, taking a friend is always good, because you can, if they're asking you to get into a pile of rubbish, you can get somebody to help you and they don't have to spend their time with you. Always take stuff that you think you'll use and not just stuff out of random. And think about plinths, etc. If you want to put your sculpture on a plinth, you could think about off cut and scants for that, and start making, like Charlotte said about making relationships at quarries. That's what you need to do. You just need to start reaching out to people and initially look to the stuff that they're literally throwing away or recycling. But be aware that these things might have breaks or shakes in them. And take a little hammer and sound or ring the stone before you put it in the car. I've got caught out before taking stuff, and when I got it to the workshop and started making it, all fell apart because it had shakes.
I'll put the link to Southern Stone in the notes for the podcast so people can click on that and find their way there.
I've got 3 other suppliers I'd like to talk about. One is Amara Stone. It's AMARESTONE. amarastone.com, and that's Steve and Denise Turner, and they are one of the biggest importers of French limestone. They're just moving their facilities into Kent because of Brexit, and they supply Lavaux and Caen, and they're brilliant to talk to, really, really sympathetic to the small amounts of stone. So he's really good. And the other people I would talk to, the Portland stone firms, if you're looking for Portland stone and Albion stone, and they all deal with base bed and wet bed stone. So
we'll put all the links onto the show notes for those suppliers. So we've just got time before we go. We're going to run out of time. We've just got time for a top tip. My top tip, because I often wear a mask when I'm carving, and I have a little tiny brush, a paintbrush, a decorator's paintbrush hung around my neck like a necklace, and I can clean my letters out and brush the dust away when I'm carving, because obviously I can't blow the dust away with my mask on. And the brush is always at hand. I'm not putting it down, losing it wherever we go. It's always there where I need it, and that's my top tip. Wear your brush around your neck when you're wearing a mask and carving, and you'll never lose your brush. You won't spend half your life looking for it.
The other thing I would say is I use a slip trailing bowl. So if you go on any pottery supply, or a lens cleaning puffer, and it's a kind of rubber tear shaped puffer, and you just kind of squeeze it and it blows air into difficult areas to get the dust out. So the brush and the puffer.
Yeah, the
was a
puffer's
really, really
more
good thing.
used to the 3D carving that you do, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the brush
Yeah.
wouldn't always get in and get the dust out in the same way.
And I have used, when I've been working with a mask on, a bicycle pump, which does the same thing.
Oh, that's a good idea. A bicycle pump. Well, I think that's
Okay.
it. So thank you for listening to the stone carving and lettering takeaway.
And hopefully we're going to have some very interesting guests as well. Yeah. Guests are coming back.
So happy chipping.
Happy chipping, everybody. Bugger.